Her knees hit the floor among shattered glass and spilled coffee. 68-year-old Helen Garrett pressed the phone against her ear, her voice cracking into a desperate whisper that she thought no one could hear. "I need a husband by 3 p.m., or they take my grandson forever." 43 minutes. That's all she had before the court handed Tyler to the father who abandoned him at 6 months old. A man who only returned because her disabled grandson was now worth $175,000. Helen had no husband, no money, no hope. But in the back booth, a Hell's Angel slowly rose to his feet. If you believe that strangers can become angels in our darkest hours, please take a moment to subscribe and follow this story to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's find out what happens when Helen's impossible deadline starts ticking down. The phone call came at the worst possible moment. Helen Garrett had just finished refilling coffee for the truckers at table 6 when her apron pocket buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a 602 area code, Phoenix. Her stomach dropped 3 floors. She knew that area code, social services. "Brenda, cover me for 2 minutes," she said to her coworker, already moving toward the supply closet at the back of Rusty's Highway Diner. "Helen, we're slammed." 2 minutes. She pushed through the closet door, pulled it shut behind her, and answered on the 4th ring. "Mrs. Garrett, this is Amanda Thornton from Arizona Child Protective Services. I'm calling regarding your grandson, Tyler." Helen's hand tightened so hard around the phone that her knuckles went white. In the 3 years since she'd taken Tyler in after her daughter Linda's overdose, she had dreaded this moment. She'd known it was coming, she just didn't know it would be today. "Yes, this is Helen Garrett." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Mrs. Garrett, Tyler's biological father, Kevin Price, has filed for emergency custody modification. Judge Morrison has scheduled an emergency hearing for 3 p.m. today at the Maricopa County Courthouse. You are required to appear with proof of stable housing and adequate family structure to maintain custody." The words hit Helen like physical blows. Each one landed harder than the last. Kevin Price, the man who had called her grandson defective when the spina bifida diagnosis came. The man who had walked out on Linda when Tyler was 6 months old, leaving nothing but a trail of unpaid bills and broken promises. The man who hadn't sent a birthday card, a Christmas present, or a single dime of child support in 10 years. Now he wanted custody? "I don't understand," Helen managed. "Kevin hasn't been in Tyler's life for a decade. Why now? Why today?" There was a pause on the other end, the sound of papers shuffling. "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Price's motivations, Mrs. Garrett. However, I can tell you that Judge Morrison takes a very particular view on single-parent households, especially when the child has special needs. The court requires proof of a 2-parent family structure for adequate care determinations." Helen's throat closed. "I'm widowed, 15 years now. My husband, Tom." "Then I strongly suggest you bring documentation of your living situation, your income, and any character witnesses you can gather. The hearing is at 3 p.m. sharp. If you fail to appear or cannot demonstrate adequate family stability, custody will be transferred to Mr. Price immediately." "But that's only 43 minutes from now. How am I supposed to—" 3 p.m., Mrs. Garrett, courtroom 3B. The line went dead. Helen slowly pulled the phone away from her ear. She stared at the cracked screen as if it might offer answers, as if the universe might suddenly apologize and say it was all a terrible mistake. Her hand was shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Through the thin walls of the supply closet, she could hear the clatter of dishes, the hum of Sunday afternoon conversation, the sizzle of burgers on the grill. Out there, people were eating meatloaf and complaining about the heat. Out there, the world made sense. In here, Helen's world was ending. She thought about Tyler, Her beautiful, brave Tyler with his forearm crutches, in his NASA t-shirts, and his smile that could light up the darkest room in any building. The boy who had lost his mother to addiction and never once complained. The boy who colored pictures of rocket ships at the diner counter while Helen worked double shifts to pay for his physical therapy. The boy who still called her Grandma Ellie and hugged her every single night before bed, even when his arms were tired from the crutches. Love you, Grandma Ellie. Love you more, sweet boy. Love you most. Every night, without fail, for 3 years. She thought about Kevin Price. Kevin, who had screamed at Linda that their son was broken and worthless and not what I signed up for. Kevin, who had packed a single suitcase and walked out the door when Tyler was 6 months old. Kevin, who had remarried some woman named Brittany and bought a house in Scottsdale and never looked back. Until now, until Tyler's medical malpractice settlement. $175,000. The money was meant for Tyler's future medical care, his therapy, his education. It was sitting in a trust account, protected, supposedly, until Tyler turned 18. But Kevin had lawyers now, expensive lawyers, lawyers who knew how to exploit every loophole in the system. And Helen? Helen had 41 minutes to produce a husband out of thin air. She leaned her forehead against the cold metal shelf and let out a shaking breath. She had fought so hard. She had sacrificed everything, her retirement, her health, her peace of mind. She had worked double shifts at 68 years old so Tyler could have the leg braces he needed, the therapy that kept him walking, the specialist who gave her hope. And now the system was going to rip him away because she didn't have a husband? A sob escaped her throat. She clamped her hand over her mouth to stifle it. No, no, she couldn't fall apart. Not now. Not with 40 minutes left. She had to think. She had to. A knock on the supply closet door made her jump. Helen, you okay in there? It was Brenda's voice, concerned but impatient. I'm fine, Helen lied. Just give me another minute. We've got a 12 top that just came in. I really need you out here. 1 minute, Brenda. She heard footsteps retreating. Helen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at her phone again. 39 minutes now. Who could she call? Her sons lived in other states, California, Texas, Florida. Even if they dropped everything and drove, they wouldn't make it in time. Her friends from church were sweet but useless in a courtroom. Her lawyer, the court-appointed one who handled Linda's estate, had never returned her calls with any urgency. There was no one. She was completely, utterly alone. Helen pushed open the supply closet door and stepped back into the fluorescent buzz of the diner. The lunch rush was in full swing. Every table was occupied. The kitchen was shouting orders. The cash register was beeping. And Helen walked through all of it like a ghost, like a woman already dead, like someone who had just received her own death sentence and was simply going through the motions until the execution. She picked up a coffee pot on autopilot, started making rounds. Table 4, refill. Table 7, refill. Table 9, refill. She didn't hear the conversations, didn't register the faces. Her mind was spinning through impossible calculations. If she left now, she could make it to the courthouse in 15 minutes. But what would she say? What could she possibly say to a judge who had already decided that a single grandmother wasn't good enough? Table 12. She lifted the coffee pot, and her hands were shaking so badly that it slipped from her grip. The pot shattered on the floor. Hot coffee splashed across the linoleum. Everyone in the diner turned to look. Helen stared at the mess, the broken glass, the spreading brown puddle, and something inside her broke too. She crumpled. Right there in the middle of Rusty's Highway Diner, 68-year-old Helen Garrett dropped to her knees among the shards of glass in the cooling coffee, and she sobbed. Helen! Brenda rushed over. Oh my God, are you hurt? Did you burn yourself? They're taking him, Helen whispered. They're taking my Tyler. What? Who's taking Tyler? His father, the one who left. He's back. He wants the settlement money. And her voice cracked, I can't stop him. I don't have a husband. The judge says I need a husband. I need a husband by 3 p.m. or I lose my grandson. And I don't know what to do, Brenda. I don't know what to do. She was barely coherent now, barely breathing. Brenda knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Helen, honey, you're not making sense. Slow down. Tell me what happened. But before Helen could answer, a shadow fell over both of them. Ma'am, the voice was deep, rough, like gravel dragged across sandpaper. Helen looked up through tear-blurred eyes. A man stood over her, tall, weathered, brown hair streaked with gray, a face that looked like it had seen things no human being should ever see. He was wearing a black leather vest with patches she couldn't quite read, and his forearms were covered in faded military tattoos. But his eyes were the thing she noticed most. They were the eyes of someone who understood loss. I heard your phone call, he said, back in the closet. Sound carries in this place. Helen's face flushed with humiliation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You need a husband by 3 p.m. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Yes, but courthouse is 15 minutes from here. Marriage license office is in the same building. If we leave now, you'll have a husband by 3 p.m. Helen stared at him. This stranger in a leather vest with Hell's Angels patches, she could read them now. This man with scars on his knuckles and a voice like he hadn't used it in years. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know you're about to lose someone you love. That's enough. Brenda stepped between them, protective. Now wait just a minute. Helen, you don't know this man. He could be anyone. He could be a Hell's Angel, the man finished. Yeah, I am. Name's Mason Cole. People call me Ghost. I've been coming to this diner every Sunday for 2 years, sitting in that back booth, drinking black coffee. Never caused any trouble. Never said much of anything to anyone. He paused. Today's different. Helen looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. She saw grief, the same grief she carried every day, the same weight, the same silence. Why? She asked. Why would you help me? Mason's jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, ancient and unhealed. Because 4 years ago, I was overseas when my wife and daughter died. Car accident, drunk driver. I wasn't there to protect them, wasn't there to save them. I've spent every day since then asking why I'm still alive. He swallowed hard. Maybe today I got my answer. Silence. The entire diner had gone quiet. Every eye was on them. Helen's hand was still trembling when she reached out and took his. I don't even know if this is legal, she said. It's legal. Emergency waiver for combat veterans. No waiting period. And you'd really do this? Marry a stranger? For a boy you've never met? Mason looked at her, and for the first time in years, something that might have been hope crossed his face. Ma'am, I've got nothing left to lose. You've got everything. Seems like an easy trade. Helen glanced at the clock on the wall. 34 minutes. She made a decision. Let's go. Mason's motorcycle was parked outside. A black Harley-Davidson, road-worn and rumbling. Helen hesitated. I've never been on one of these. Hold on tight. Don't lean against the turns. And don't let go. She climbed on behind him, her waitress uniform still stained with coffee, her apron still tied around her waist. She wrapped her arms around his leather-clad torso and held on for dear life. The engine roared, and they tore out of the parking lot like two people racing against death itself. The wind whipped Helen's silver blonde hair into a frenzy as Mason weaved through Phoenix traffic. Red lights meant nothing. Speed limits were suggestions. Car horns blared and faded behind them. Helen's heart was pounding, from fear, from adrenaline, from the sheer insanity of what she was doing. She was about to marry a stranger, a Hell's Angel, a man she'd known for less than 10 minutes. But what choice did she have? What choice did Tyler have? 28 minutes. Mason took a corner so sharp that Helen's knee nearly scraped the asphalt. She gasped, tightening her grip around him. "Trust me," he shouted over the engine. "I don't have a choice," she shouted back. 23 minutes. The courthouse appeared ahead, a massive beige building with columns and flags and the word "Justice" carved above the entrance. Mason pulled into the parking lot, killed the engine, and was off the bike before Helen could catch her breath. "Come on," he said, grabbing her hand. "Marriage license first, second floor." They ran. Helen hadn't run in years. Her knees screamed in protest. Her lungs burned. But she ran anyway, through the metal detectors, past the security guards, up the stairs 2 at a time. Second floor, office 217, marriage licenses. There was a line. "No," Helen breathed. "No, no, no." 6 people ahead of them, a couple giggling and holding hands, a nervous young man clutching a ring box, a woman checking her makeup in a compact mirror. "We don't have time," Helen said. "Mason, we don't have time." Mason walked straight to the front of the line. "Hey," the giggling woman protested, "there's a line." Mason ignored her. He placed both hands on the counter and looked at the clerk, a middle-aged woman named Donna Reyes, according to her nameplate. "Ma'am," he said, "we need an emergency marriage license, right now." Donna looked up from her computer with the bored expression of someone who had heard every excuse in the book. "Standard processing is 24 to 72 hours. Emergency requests require documentation of..." Mason slapped his military ID on the counter. "Combat veteran, emergency waiver, Arizona Revised Statutes 25-121. No waiting period for active duty or honorably discharged military personnel with verifiable service records." Donna picked up the ID, examined it. Her eyebrows rose. "Special Forces? 22 years, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and right now about 18 minutes to save a little boy from being sent to live with a man who abandoned him." Donna looked at Mason, then at Helen, disheveled, coffee-stained, tear-streaked. "This isn't some kind of scam, immigration thing?" "Ma'am," Mason said, his voice dropping low, "there's a 10-year-old boy with spina bifida who's about to be taken from the only family he's ever known because the system says his grandmother needs a husband to be a good enough parent. You and I both know that's wrong, but I can't change the law. I can only ask you to move fast." Donna stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out a form. "I need both your driver's licenses, full legal names, current addresses, sign here, here, and here." Helen's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. She signed her name, Helen Marie Garrett, in a scrawl that was barely legible. Mason signed beneath her, Mason James Cole. His handwriting was steady, controlled. Donna stamped the form, typed something into her computer, a printer whirred to life. "Courtroom 4A does civil ceremonies. Judge Blackwell is on duty. Down the hall, second door on the left." Helen grabbed the license. Thank you so much." "Ma'am," Donna called after them. Helen turned. "I hope that little boy knows how lucky he is." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "He will. I'll make sure he does." Courtroom 4A was small and empty except for Judge Sarah Blackwell, a silver-haired woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She looked at Mason and Helen as they burst through the doors, out of breath and desperate. "I assume you're my 247 emergency?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mason said. "We need to be married, immediately." Judge Blackwell examined the license, looked at Mason's vest, looked at Helen's coffee-stained uniform. "This is highly unusual." "Your Honor," Helen stepped forward, "I have a custody hearing at 3 p.m. in courtroom 3B. My grandson, the only family I have left, is going to be taken from me by a man who abandoned him at 6 months old. All because I'm a widow. All because the court says I need a two-parent household. This man," she gestured to Mason, "offered to help me. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know Tyler. But he's willing to stand beside me because that's the kind of person he is." Judge Blackwell studied them both. "You understand that marriage is a legal contract, that it carries rights and responsibilities, that you cannot simply dissolve it when the hearing is over?" "I understand," Mason said. "And you, Mrs. Garrett, you understand what you're agreeing to?" Helen looked at Mason, this stranger who had heard her breaking down in a supply closet and chosen to help instead of look away. "I understand," she said. Judge Blackwell nodded slowly. "Very well, face each other. Join hands." They did. Mason's hands were rough, calloused from years of work and war. Helen's were soft, worn smooth by decades of carrying plates and wiping counters, but they fit together somehow, like puzzle pieces that had been waiting to be found. "Do you, Mason James Cole, take Helen Marie Garrett to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Mason's eyes never left Helen's. "I do." "And do you, Helen Marie Garrett, take Mason James Cole to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Helen's voice was barely a whisper. "I do." Judge Blackwell signed the certificate. "By the power vested in me by the state of Arizona, I now pronounce you husband and wife." She paused. "You may kiss the bride if you wish, though I suspect you have somewhere more urgent to be." Mason looked at Helen, a question in his eyes. She gave a tiny nod. He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "you're not alone anymore." Helen gripped his hand. The clock on the wall read 2:56 p.m. They ran, down the hall, down the stairs, through the metal detectors, past the security guards who shouted after them to slow down. Courtroom 3B, third door on the right. Helen's chest was heaving. Her vision was swimming, but she was there. They were there. 2:59 p.m., she pushed open the doors and came face to face with Kevin Price. He looked exactly like she remembered. Handsome in a slick, superficial way, spray-tanned, expensive suit, arrogant smile that said he'd already won. "Helen." He drew out her name like it was an insult. "Cutting it a little close, aren't we?" "Mr. Price, sit down." Judge Morrison's voice cut through the tension. She was a stern woman in her early 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and the demeanor of someone who had seen every trick in the book. Kevin smirked and returned to his seat beside his lawyer, a shark in pinstripes named Derek Sullivan. Helen and Mason entered the courtroom together. Helen's court-appointed attorney, Marcus Webb, looked up from his files with an expression of pure confusion. "Helen, who is—" "My husband," Helen said, handing him the marriage certificate. "Mason Cole." Marcus's jaw dropped. So did Kevin's. "Your what?" Kevin was on his feet again. You can't just—" "Mr. Price," Judge Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. "I will not tell you again. Sit down." Kevin sat, but his eyes were fixed on Mason with pure venom. Mason didn't flinch. Judge Morrison examined the marriage certificate. Her eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Garrett, excuse me, Mrs. Cole, you married this man today? 1 hour ago?" "Yes, Your Honor." "May I ask why?" Helen took a breath, steadied herself. "Because when I received the call from CPS this afternoon, I was told that I needed to demonstrate a two-parent household to maintain custody of my grandson. I've raised Tyler for 3 years. I've worked double shifts to pay for his medical care. I've sacrificed everything to give him a good life. But apparently that's not enough. Apparently I need a husband." She paused. "So I got one." The gallery murmured. Kevin's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this is clearly a marriage of convenience, a sham designed to manipulate these proceedings. Furthermore, the man she married is a member of the Hells Angels, a criminal motorcycle gang classified by federal law enforcement as an outlaw organization." Mason rose slowly. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Morrison studied him, his leather vest, his tattoos, his scars. "You may." "My name is Mason Cole. I served 22 years in the United States Army, including 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. I was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor and 2 Purple Hearts for wounds received in service to this country. I have never been arrested, never been convicted of any crime, never been so much as detained for questioning." He paused. "I joined the Hells Angels 4 years ago, after I lost my wife and daughter to a drunk driver. They were the only people who understood what that kind of loss does to a man. They gave me a reason to keep living when I had none." His voice cracked, and the entire courtroom went silent. "I married Helen today because I heard a grandmother crying in a supply closet, about to lose the only family she has left. And I couldn't walk away." He swallowed hard. "I've walked away from enough in my life. Not this time." Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, "This hearing is continued to allow proper investigation. Temporary custody remains with Mrs. Cole pending review. We reconvene in 30 days. Kevin slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. She married a biker, a stranger. How is that better than—" "Mr. Price," Judge Morrison's voice was ice. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. You abandoned your son 10 years ago. You paid nothing in child support. You made no effort to contact him. And now you appear demanding emergency custody the same month his settlement check was approved." She leaned forward. "I may be required to consider your petition, but I am not required to be impressed by it. Court is adjourned." The gavel cracked. Kevin Price stood frozen, his face twisted with rage. Mason helped Helen to her feet. Her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. "We did it," she whispered. "We bought time." 30 days, Mason said quietly. "That's how long we have to prove this is real." Helen looked up at him, this stranger who was now her husband. "How do we do that?" Mason's jaw tightened. "I guess I need to meet my grandson." Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun blazed down on them with typical Arizona fury. Helen leaned against the building's cool stone wall, trying to catch her breath, trying to process what had just happened. She was married to a Hells Angel, a man she'd known for less than 2 hours. "I don't even know your middle name," she said suddenly. "James. Mason James Cole. That's me. I'm Helen Marie." She laughed, a desperate, slightly unhinged sound. "Garrett. Cole now, I suppose." "Suppose so." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 strangers bound together by a single act of desperation. "Why did you really do it?" Helen asked. "The truth, not the speech you gave in there." Mason was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "My daughter's name was Emma. She was 14. She wanted to work at NASA, just like your grandson, if what I heard is true. Space was her whole world. She had glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, posters of the Mars rovers, a telescope she saved up 2 years to buy." He stopped, swallowed. "When I was overseas, my wife Sarah would send me videos of Emma doing her homework, eating dinner, sleeping under those stars. It was the only thing that kept me sane. Then one day, the videos stopped. And 2 days after that, my commander called me into his office. His hands were shaking now. Drunk driver ran a red light, hit them broadside. Sarah died on impact. Emma held on for 6 hours. They told me she kept asking for her daddy." Helen's hand went to her mouth. "By the time I got stateside, they were both gone. Buried. I missed everything. The funeral, the goodbye, all of it. His voice broke. I put a gun in my mouth 3 times after that. 3 times I couldn't pull the trigger. Thought I was a coward. Now I wonder if I was just waiting. Waiting for what? Mason looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't expected. Hope. Waiting for someone who needed saving. Someone I could actually help. Helen reached out and took his hand. Tyler's going to love you, she said softly. I know it. You don't know that. I do. She squeezed his fingers. Because you're the kind of man who hears a stranger crying and decides to change her whole life. That's rare, Mason. That's precious. And Tyler knows how to spot it. Kids always do. Mason's jaw tightened. What if I screw this up? Then we screw it up together. She meant it, and somehow impossibly, he believed her. The drive to Helen's apartment was 15 minutes of silence, broken only by the rumble of Mason's Harley. Helen's apartment was small, a second-floor unit in a complex that had seen better days. The carpet was worn, the appliances were dated, but it was clean, and it was home. Tyler's at school until 3:30, Helen said as they walked inside. The bus drops him off in about 20 minutes. Mason looked around. He saw the leg braces by the door, the special cushion on the couch, the drawings of rocket ships taped to every available surface. He likes space, Mason said. Loves it. Obsessed, really. Wants to be an astronaut. Nobody's had the heart to tell him that's not possible for someone with spina bifida. Why not? Helen looked at him sharply. What do you mean, why not? I mean, who says it's not possible? They said a lot of things were impossible for a kid from the wrong side of Albuquerque, too. Didn't stop me from making special forces. Helen stared at him. Then slowly she smiled. You might be good for him after all. The sound of a bus engine outside made them both turn. He's here, Helen said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Mason, please, be gentle with him. He's been through so much. Mason nodded. The front door opened, and there was Tyler, 10 years old, blonde hair that stuck up in every direction, bright blue eyes behind glasses that were slightly too big for his face, a NASA t-shirt that had been washed so many times the logo was barely visible. He stood in the doorway on his forearm crutches, looking at the stranger in his grandmother's living room. Grandma Ellie? Who's that? Helen knelt down, her old knees protesting, and opened her arms. Tyler moved toward her with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to navigate the world differently. Tyler, sweetheart, I need to tell you something. Something important. Is it about the man in the leather jacket? Yes. Tyler looked at Mason, studied him with the unnerving intensity that children sometimes have. Are you a bad guy? Mason shook his head slowly. No, son, I'm not a bad guy. Then why are you wearing that? My friend Derek says guys who wear those jackets are all criminals. Tyler, Helen started, but Mason held up a hand. He walked over to the couch and sat down, bringing himself closer to Tyler's eye level. Can I tell you something, Tyler? Something true? The boy nodded cautiously. When I was in the army, I wore a uniform. It had patches too, different ones, but patches. People looked at that uniform and they thought they knew everything about me. Some of them thought I was a hero. Some of them thought I was a monster. Most of them were wrong. He tapped his leather vest. This is the same thing. It's just clothes. It doesn't tell you who I am. You want to know who I am? Ask me. I'll tell you the truth. Tyler considered this. Okay, he said finally. Who are you? Mason took a deep breath. My name is Mason. I was a soldier for a long time. I have a bad knee and a worse attitude, and I drink too much coffee. I had a daughter once. Her name was Emma, and she loves space just like you do. She died 4 years ago, and I've been really sad ever since. Tyler's eyes went wide. She died? Yeah. I'm sorry. That must hurt a lot. Mason's throat tightened. It does, every day. Tyler was quiet for a moment, then, My mom died too, when I was 7. Grandma Ellie says she's watching me from heaven. I bet she is. Do you think Emma is watching you from heaven? Mason had to look away. His eyes were burning. I hope so, son. I really hope so. Tyler hobbled forward on his crutches until he was standing right in front of Mason. Why are you in our house? Mason looked at Helen. She gave a tiny nod. Because your grandma needs help, Mason said. There's a man, your father, who wants to take you away from her, and the only way to stop him was for your grandma to have a husband. So I married her. Today, about an hour ago. Tyler's mouth fell open. You married Grandma Ellie? I did. So you're my grandpa now? Mason hesitated. I don't know, that's up to you. I'm not trying to replace anyone, I just want to help. Tyler thought about this very seriously, the kind of serious only a 10-year-old can be. My real dad left because I was sick, he said quietly. He didn't want a broken kid. Tyler, Helen started. It's okay, Grandma, I know. Tyler looked at Mason. Are you going to leave too, when things get hard? Mason's chest ached. He thought about Emma, about Sarah, about all the leaving he'd done, the deployments, the missed birthdays, the moments he could never get back. He got down on his bad knee, the one with the shrapnel scars, and looked Tyler directly in the eyes. Kid, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. I had a daughter. I loved her more than anything in this world, and I wasn't there when she needed me most. I've spent 4 years hating myself for that. His voice was steady now, certain. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I can promise you this. I will not leave. No matter how hard it gets, no matter what anyone says, I'm here now, and I'm staying. Tyler stared at him. You mean it? I mean it. How do I know you're telling the truth? Mason reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. He handed it to Tyler. It showed a young girl, about 14, standing in front of a telescope, grinning at the camera. She had Mason's eyes. That's Emma. That's my promise. I carry her with me everywhere. And I'm telling you the same thing I would have told her. I won't give up. Not on you. Not on your grandma. Not ever. Tyler looked at the photo for a long time. Then he handed it back. Okay, he said simply. You can stay. Helen let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Okay, Mason repeated. Yeah, okay, Tyler paused. But I have one question. What's that? Do you know anything about black holes? For the first time in 4 years, Mason Cole smiled. No, he said, but I'd really like to learn. Tyler grinned, a real, full, brilliant grin that lit up his entire face. Come on, he said, grabbing Mason's hand with surprising strength. I have books, lots of books. I'll teach you everything. As the boy dragged the scarred veteran toward his bedroom, Helen stood in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. 30 days. They had 30 days to prove they were a real family. But watching Tyler pull Mason toward a shelf full of astronomy books, watching her grandson laugh for the first time in weeks, watching this broken stranger begin to put himself back together, piece by piece, Helen knew something the court didn't. They already were. Tyler's bedroom was a universe unto itself. Every inch of wall space was covered with something related to space. Posters of galaxies, diagrams of rocket engines, a hand-drawn map of the solar system with Pluto defiantly included because Tyler refused to accept its demotion. Mason stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. This is incredible, he said quietly. Tyler beamed. Grandma Ellie got me most of it from garage sales. The telescope was my birthday present last year. It's not super powerful, but you can see Jupiter's moons if you know where to look. Mason walked over to the telescope, ran his fingers along its surface. Emma had one just like this. Same brand. Really? Yeah, she saved up her allowance for 2 years to buy it. Mason's voice caught. I was deployed when it finally arrived. Sarah, my wife, she sent me a video of Emma setting it up. She was so excited she was shaking. Tyler moved closer, his crutches clicking softly against the floor. Did she ever see Jupiter's moons? I don't know. I never got to ask her. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood loss in ways that words couldn't capture. I could show you, Tyler said finally. Tonight, if it's clear, we could look together. Mason turned to face him. I'd like that, Tyler. I'd really like that. The first night was awkward in ways Helen had expected and ways she hadn't. Mason insisted on sleeping on the floor. Helen argued that the couch pulled out into a bed. Mason said the floor was fine. He'd slept on worse in Afghanistan. Helen said this wasn't Afghanistan. Mason said old habits die hard. They compromised. Mason took the pull-out couch, but he didn't actually pull it out. He just lay there in his clothes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a home that wasn't his. Around midnight, he heard footsteps, small ones, uneven. Tyler appeared in the living room doorway, his crutches tucked under his arms, his face pale in the darkness. Can't sleep? Mason asked. Tyler shook his head. Bad dreams. About what? My dad, the real one, Kevin. Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. I dreamed he came and took me away, and Grandma Ellie was screaming, but nobody could hear her. Mason sat up slowly. Come here. Tyler hesitated for a moment. Then he made his way to the couch and sat down next to Mason, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You want to know something? Mason said. When I was in the Army, I had bad dreams all the time. Terrible ones, the kind that make you afraid to close your eyes. What did you do? I learned a trick. Want me to teach you? Tyler nodded. When the bad dream comes, you don't fight it. You let it play out. But at the very end, right before the worst part happens, you change one thing. Just one thing. You make something different. You take control. Like what? Like, in your dream, your grandma is screaming and nobody can hear her. But what if, right at that moment, someone did hear her? What if a whole army of people heard her and came running? What if you weren't alone? Tyler thought about this. Could I make you come? In the dream? You could make anyone come. It's your dream. Then I'd make you come, and all your biker friends, and you'd stop Kevin from taking me. Mason put his arm around the boy's thin shoulders. That's exactly what's going to happen in real life too, Tyler. I promise. Tyler leaned into him. Can I stay here? Just for a little while? You can stay as long as you want. Within minutes, Tyler was asleep against Mason's side, and Mason, who hadn't slept more than 3 hours straight in 4 years, felt his own eyes growing heavy. When Helen checked on them at 2 a.m., she found them both unconscious on the couch. Tyler curled against Mason like a child seeking warmth from a fire. She pulled a blanket over them both and went back to bed with tears on her cheeks. The first week passed faster than Helen expected. Mason fell into the rhythm of their lives with surprising ease. He was awake every morning before Helen, coffee already made, Tyler's oatmeal already on the stove. He drove Tyler to school on the back of his motorcycle, Tyler wearing a helmet that was comically too large, but grinning like he'd won the lottery. He picked Tyler up every afternoon and helped with homework, even when the math was beyond his understanding. I don't know why x equals 7, Mason admitted on day 4, frowning at Tyler's algebra worksheet. When I was in school, we didn't make letters equal numbers. Letters were letters. Numbers were numbers. Everyone knew their place. Tyler giggled. You sound like Grandma Ellie. Your grandma's a smart woman. She says the same thing about new math. Mason ruffled Tyler's hair. See, we're already family. But the peace didn't last. On day 8, the first CPS visit came without warning. Helen was at work when Mason heard the knock. He opened the door to find a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a clipboard. Victoria Nash, according to her ID badge. Mr. Cole, I'm here for an unannounced welfare check on Tyler Garrett. Mason's jaw tightened. Tyler's at school. I'm aware. I'll be conducting a home inspection in the meantime. May I come in? It wasn't really a question. Mason stepped aside. Victoria walked through the apartment with methodical precision, opening closets, checking the refrigerator, examining Tyler's room. She took notes constantly, her pen scratching against paper like an accusation. I see men's clothing in the closet, she observed. Toiletries in the bathroom. You're living here full-time? That's generally what husbands do. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct with you. This marriage happened under highly unusual circumstances. A wedding performed less than an hour before a custody hearing raises significant red flags. Mason met her gaze without flinching. I understand that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a marriage of convenience designed to manipulate the court. It was a marriage of desperation, ma'am. There's a difference. Victoria's pen stopped moving. Explain. Helen Garrett was given 43 minutes to produce a husband or lose her grandson. 43 minutes. To a man who abandoned his son at 6 months old and hasn't paid a dime of support in 10 years. That's not justice. That's a system designed to fail people like her. Mason's voice was steady, controlled. I heard her crying in a closet. I could have walked away. I didn't. Call that convenience if you want. I call it doing the right thing. Victoria studied him for a long moment. You're a Hell's Angel. Yes, the organization is classified by federal law enforcement as an outlaw motorcycle gang. I'm aware of the classification. I'm also aware that I've never been arrested, never been convicted, never been so much as questioned about any illegal activity. My club brothers helped me survive when I lost my wife and daughter. They gave me a reason to keep breathing. If that makes me an outlaw, then the law needs to change. Victoria wrote something on her clipboard. Mason couldn't see what. I'll be interviewing Tyler separately, she said, at his school, without you or Mrs. Cole present. Fine. And I'll be back, multiple times, unannounced. We'll be here. Victoria paused at the door. Mr. Cole, can I give you some advice? Go ahead. In my 20 years doing this job, I've seen every kind of family you can imagine. Good ones, bad ones that looked perfect on paper but were rotten underneath, and ones that looked like disasters but were full of love. She tucked her clipboard under her arm. I haven't decided which kind you are yet, but I will. So whatever you're doing, whatever this is, make sure it's real, because Tyler's the one who'll pay the price if it isn't. She left. Mason stood alone in the apartment, her words echoing in his head. Make sure it's real. Was it real? Could something that started as an act of desperation become something genuine? He didn't know, but he was starting to hope. The interview with Tyler happened 2 days later. Helen paced the apartment like a caged animal, checking her phone every 30 seconds, unable to eat or sit still. What if he says something wrong? She kept asking. What if they twist his words? What if... Helen, Mason caught her hands, held them still. Tyler knows the truth. He knows we love him. He knows this is his home. That's all that matters. You don't understand how these people work, Mason. They have quotas. They have biases. They see a biker and an old woman, and they've already made up their minds. Then we change their minds. How? By being exactly who we are, a family, a real one. Helen looked up at him. Are we? Real? The question hung between them. Mason didn't have an answer, not yet. But when Tyler came home that afternoon, grinning from ear to ear, the tension broke. I told them everything, Grandma, about how Mason makes my oatmeal and helps with homework and let me ride his motorcycle. Mrs. Nash asked if I felt safe, and I said, I feel safer than I've ever felt in my whole life. Helen scooped him into her arms. Oh, sweetheart. She asked if Mason was nice to you, Grandma. I said he was the nicest person I ever met except for you. Was that okay? Over Tyler's shoulder, Mason and Helen's eyes met. That was perfect, sweetheart, Helen whispered. Absolutely perfect. Kevin Price didn't wait for the system to work. On day 12, Helen found her car tires slashed in the diner parking lot. No witnesses, no evidence, but she knew. On day 15, anonymous tips started flooding into CPS. Drug activity at the Cole residence, domestic violence, child neglect, all of them false, all of them requiring investigation. On day 17, a man showed up at Tyler's school claiming to be his father, demanding to take him home. The principal called Helen in a panic. By the time she arrived, the man was gone, but Tyler was shaking so badly he couldn't hold his crutches. "He said he was my dad," Tyler sobbed into Helen's arms. "He said he was coming to take me away, and there was nothing anyone could do about it." Helen held him tight, her blood running cold. "What did he look like, baby?" "Tall, blonde hair, mean eyes." Kevin. Kevin had come to Tyler's school. Mason found out that evening. His reaction was terrifying in its calm. "He went to his school," Mason said, his voice flat. "He went to a 10-year-old school and threatened him." "Mason." "No." Mason was already reaching for his phone. "This ends now." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done from the start. I'm calling my brothers." The Hells Angels arrived at Helen's apartment that night, not in a threatening way. There were no roaring engines or intimidating displays. They came in pickup trucks and SUVs, dressed in plain clothes, looking for all the world like a group of concerned friends. But Helen knew who they were, and she was terrified. Viper, the chapter president, was the first through the door. He was a big man, bald head covered in tattoos, but his eyes were surprisingly gentle. "Mrs. Cole," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus. Ghost has told us what's happening. We're here to help." "Help how?" Viper looked at Mason. Mason nodded. "From now on, Tyler doesn't go anywhere without an escort. School pickup, school drop-off, doctor's appointments. One of us will always be there. We're also going to take turns watching your apartment at night. If Kevin Price or anyone else comes near this family again, we'll know about it." Helen was overwhelmed. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, we're offering," Viper smiled. "Ghost is family. That means you and Tyler are family too. And we protect our family, Mrs. Cole, no matter what." Another biker stepped forward, younger, mid-30s, with kind eyes and a nervous energy. "I'm Rocket," he said. "My daughter has cerebral palsy, different from spina bifida, but I know what it's like. The doctors, the therapy, the insurance fights. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who gets it, I'm here." Helen felt tears welling up. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let us help," Viper said. "That's all we ask." From the corner of the room, Tyler watched with wide eyes. "Grandma Ellie," he whispered, "are all these people going to protect us?" Helen pulled him close. "Yes, sweetheart, they are." Tyler looked at the room full of tattooed men society had taught him to fear, and smiled. "Cool." The next 2 weeks were a blur of routine and vigilance. Mason drove Tyler to school every morning. Rocket picked him up every afternoon. At night, a rotating patrol of Hells Angels kept watch from the parking lot. Never intrusive, never threatening, just present. The anonymous CPS tips kept coming, but Victoria Nash's investigations found nothing. No drugs, no violence, no neglect. Just a grandmother and a veteran, and a little boy trying to build a life together. "I'm starting to see a pattern here," Victoria told Helen during her 4th unannounced visit. "These tips are clearly coordinated, malicious. If I can prove where they're coming from, Mr. Price will face serious consequences." "How do you prove something like that?" "Phone records, IP addresses. Sometimes people aren't as clever as they think." Victoria paused. "Mrs. Cole, I want you to know something, off the record." "What?" "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen what real abuse looks like, what real neglect looks like. This isn't it." She glanced toward the living room where Mason was helping Tyler with a science project. Whatever this started as, it's not that anymore. Anyone can see it. Hope flickered in Helen's chest. Does that mean? It means my report to the judge will reflect what I've observed. A stable home, a loving family, a child who is thriving. Victoria stood. Good luck, Mrs. Cole. I think you're going to need it. Kevin Price made his move on day 23. Helen was at work when her phone rang. The number was blocked. Hello? Helen. Kevin's voice was silk over steel. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. That's fine. I'll do the talking. Drop the custody fight. Sign Tyler over to me, and your biker husband walks away clean. Helen's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I know people, Helen. People who owe me favors. People who can make life very difficult for Mason Cole. That little club of his? I can have federal agents crawling all over them by the end of the week. Drug trafficking charges, weapons violations, RICO investigations. Mason hasn't done anything wrong. Doesn't matter. Accusations are enough. By the time it's all sorted out, he'll have lost years of his life. And Tyler will be mine anyway. Kevin's voice dropped. Sign the papers, Helen. Make this easy on everyone. Helen's hand was shaking. You're despicable. I'm a father fighting for his son. You're a monster fighting for a paycheck. Kevin laughed. Call it whatever you want. You have until the end of the week to decide. After that, I stop being nice. The line went dead. Helen didn't tell Mason about the call immediately. She carried it with her like a stone in her chest, weighing her options, calculating the risks. Could Kevin really do what he threatened? Could he destroy Mason's life just to get to Tyler? The answer, she knew, was yes. Kevin had money, connections, lawyers who knew how to weaponize the system against innocent people. But signing Tyler over meant losing everything. It meant breaking her promise to Linda. It meant abandoning her grandson to a man who saw him only as a source of income. On day 24, she finally told Mason. His reaction surprised her. Good, Mason said. Good? How is any of this good? Because he's scared, Helen. He's making threats because he knows he's losing. If he thought he had this case won, he wouldn't need to intimidate you. Mason took her hands. We don't give in to bullies, not ever. That's the first thing the Army taught me. What if he follows through? What if he really does bring those charges against your club? Then we fight them together. Mason's grip tightened. Helen, I've faced worse than Kevin Price. I've faced enemy combatants who wanted me dead. I've faced bureaucrats who wanted to bury me in paperwork. I've faced my own demons every single day for 4 years. Kevin Price is nothing. He's a coward who abandoned his own son. And cowards always lose in the end. How can you be so sure? Because we have something he doesn't. What's that? Mason looked toward Tyler's room, where the sound of a video about Mars rovers was playing softly. Something worth fighting for. That night, after Tyler was in bed, Helen and Mason sat on the small balcony of the apartment. The Arizona stars were brilliant overhead, far more visible than they would be in a city center. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Can I ask you something? Helen said. Anything. Why did you really do it? That first day in the diner, the truth. Mason was quiet for a long time. When I came home from Afghanistan the final time, he said slowly, I was broken in ways I didn't even understand. The VA diagnosed me with PTSD, gave me some pills, told me to attend group therapy. I tried, for a while, but then Sarah and Emma died, and everything just collapsed. He stared at the sky. I joined the club because I needed to belong somewhere, needed to be around people who didn't expect me to be normal. They saved my life, Helen, literally. Viper found me in my garage one night with a gun in my hand and talked me down. 3 hours he sat there with me, just talking, not judging, just being present. Helen's hand found his. But even with the club, I was just going through the motions, breathing without living, existing without purpose. He turned to look at her. Then I heard you in that closet, heard you say you needed a husband by 3 p.m., and something woke up inside me, something that had been sleeping for 4 years. What? Hope. His voice cracked. The hope that maybe I wasn't just taking up space, that maybe there was still a reason I survived when Sarah and Emma didn't, that maybe God or fate or whatever you want to call it had been saving me for something. For us? For you? For Tyler? Mason squeezed her hand. I know this started as an arrangement, a deal, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being that. You and Tyler, you're the first thing I've cared about since I lost my girls. The first thing that's felt real. Helen leaned her head against his shoulder. I love Tyler like he's my own, Mason continued. And I care about you, Helen. More than I expected. More than I knew how to say. She looked up at him. I care about you too, Mason. I have for a while now. What does that mean? For us? Helen considered the question carefully. It means we fight, she said. Together. For Tyler. For each other. For whatever this is becoming. And after? When the hearing is over? When we don't need to pretend anymore? Helen smiled. Soft, genuine. The first real smile she'd allowed herself in weeks. Who says we're pretending? Mason stared at her. Something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked like wonder. Helen, don't say anything. Not yet. Let's get through this first, and then we'll figure out the rest. He nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. They sat in silence, watching the stars, hands intertwined. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Helen allowed herself to believe that everything might actually be okay. Day 28 brought the worst news yet. Marcus Webb, Helen's court-appointed attorney, called with his voice shaking. Helen, we have a problem, a big one. What kind of problem? Kevin's lawyer just submitted new evidence, a witness, a former Hells Angels member named Danny Kowalski. He's claiming that Mason was involved in drug trafficking and weapons dealing through the club. Helen's stomach dropped. That's a lie. Mason has never... I know, but Kowalski is willing to testify under oath, and he's got details, dates, locations, amounts, enough to make the judge take it seriously. This is insane. Kevin paid him. This is obviously nothing, Helen. In court, it's his word against Mason's, and Mason is a Hells Angel. The judge is already predisposed to believe the worst. Helen felt the ground shifting under her feet. Everything they'd built, the home, the routine, the fragile sense of hope, it was all crumbling. What do we do? I don't know. I'm trying to find a way to discredit Kowalski, but we're running out of time. The final hearing is in 2 days. 2 days. I'm sorry, Helen. I'm doing everything I can. The line went dead. Helen stood frozen in her kitchen, the phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline that had just been severed. 2 days. They had 2 days to dismantle a lie that could destroy everything. She heard the front door open. Tyler's voice, bright and excited, talking to Mason about something he'd learned at school. She couldn't tell them. Not yet. Not until she figured out what to do. But as she watched Mason help Tyler out of his jacket, saw the way they laughed together like they'd known each other forever, she made a silent vow. She would not let Kevin Price win. Not today. Not ever. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, she would protect her family, both of them. Helen waited until Tyler was asleep before she told Mason. She found him on the balcony, staring at the stars the way he did every night now, like he was searching for Emma somewhere among them. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, memorizing the way he looked in the darkness. Strong, steady, the man who had walked into her life 43 minutes before disaster and refused to leave. Mason, he turned, saw her face, and knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? She told him everything, the witness, the accusations, the 2 days they had left. Mason listened without interrupting. When she finished, his jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. Danny Kowalski, he said quietly. I know that name. You do? He was in the club, years ago, before I joined, got kicked out for stealing from the treasury. He's had a grudge ever since. Mason's voice was flat. Kevin must have found him, paid him off. Can we prove that? Maybe, but proving a negative is hard. Proving I didn't do something I never did in the first place. He shook his head. It's my word against his. And I'm a Hell's Angel. The judge is going to believe the worst. Helen grabbed his arm. We can't give up. Not now. Not after everything. I'm not giving up. Mason turned to face her fully. But I need you to understand something, Helen. If this goes wrong, if they use Kowalski's testimony to come after the club, I won't let the others go down for me. I'll take whatever deal they offer to keep them clear. Mason, no. Those men saved my life. I won't repay them by dragging them into my mess. This isn't your mess. This is Kevin's mess. He manufactured this entire thing. Doesn't matter. In the eyes of the law, I'm the liability. And if cutting me loose protects you and Tyler, then that's what has to happen. Helen felt tears burning in her eyes. You promised Tyler you wouldn't leave. The words hit Mason like a physical blow. He flinched, looked away. I know what I promised. Then keep it. Find another way. Fight. Mason was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. There might be one option. Tank, Marcus, the club lawyer, he's been digging into Kevin's background, looking for leverage. If we can find something, anything that proves Kevin is unfit, do it. Call him now. Mason pulled out his phone. His hands were steady, but Helen could see the fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for them. For her. For Tyler. For the family he'd only just started to believe he deserved. Tank answered on the second ring. Ghost, I was about to call you. Tell me you found something. Brother, I found a gold mine. Tank arrived at the apartment within the hour, carrying a laptop and a stack of files that looked like they weighed 10 pounds. Kevin Price is dirty, Tank said without preamble. I mean, we knew he was a scumbag, but this goes deeper, way deeper. He spread the files across the kitchen table. Helen and Mason leaned in. First off, the guy's been married 3 times. First wife filed for divorce citing emotional abuse. Second wife died under suspicious circumstances, ruled accidental, but the insurance company flagged it for investigation. He killed his wife? Helen breathed. Couldn't prove it, but the payout was $500,000. And guess who had gambling debts at the time? Mason's eyes narrowed. Kevin. Bingo. Now, wife number 3, Brittany. She's 26 years younger than him, former cocktail waitress. Married him 8 months ago. Tank pulled up a photo on his laptop. I did some digging. Turns out Brittany's been making some interesting phone calls lately. To who? To a domestic violence hotline. 3 calls in the last month. Never stayed on long enough to file a report, but she's reaching out. Helen's mind raced. She's scared of him. That's what I'm thinking. If we can get her to flip, to testify about what Kevin's really like behind closed doors. She'll never do it, Mason said. She's too afraid. Maybe, but people do surprising things when they're desperate. Tank closed the laptop. There's one more thing. The witness, Danny Kowalski. I found his bank records. How? Tank smiled grimly. You don't want to know. Point is, 3 days ago, $50,000 was deposited into his account. Wire transfer. Origin? A shell company registered in Nevada. Can you trace it to Kevin? Working on it, but even without the direct link, 50 grand appearing 3 days before he agrees to testify? That's going to raise some eyebrows. For the first time in hours, Helen felt hope. We can win this, she said. We can actually win this. Don't celebrate yet, Tank warned. Kevin's lawyer is good, really good. He'll spin this as coincidence, character assassination, whatever it takes. We need Brittany. She's the smoking gun. How do we get to her? Tank looked at Helen. You're a grandmother, non-threatening, sympathetic. If anyone can reach her, it's you. Me? I don't even know the woman. Then get to know her, fast. Mason shook his head. It's too dangerous. If Kevin finds out Helen approached his wife, Kevin doesn't need to find out. Tank pulled a card from his pocket. Brittany goes to a yoga class every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Studio called Inner Peace out in Scottsdale. Class ends at 10. You could be there when she gets out. Helen took the card. Her hands were trembling. What do I say to her? The truth. Tell her what Kevin's doing to your family. Tell her what he's done to Tyler. And pray that somewhere under all that fear, there's still a decent person who wants to do the right thing. Helen looked at Mason. He looked back at her with something close to anguish. I should be the one doing this, he said. No, Tank's right, you'd scare her. I won't. Helen squared her shoulders. I've spent my whole life being underestimated because I'm old and I'm a woman. Time to use that. Mason pulled her into a hug. Be careful. I will. I mean it, Helen. Kevin is dangerous. If he finds out what you're doing, then we deal with it. Together. She pulled back and looked him in the eyes. That's what families do, right? Mason couldn't speak. He just nodded. And Helen went to bed that night knowing that tomorrow she would either save her family or destroy it. Tuesday morning came too fast and not fast enough. Helen drove to Scottsdale alone, despite Mason's protests. She wore her nicest dress, the one she saved for church, and carried nothing but her purse and her courage. The yoga studio was in a strip mall between a smoothie shop and a nail salon. Helen parked across the street and waited. At 10:07, women started trickling out, carrying rolled mats and water bottles. Helen scanned each face until she found the one she was looking for. Brittany Price was younger than Helen expected. Pretty in a fragile way, with blonde hair and eyes that darted nervously even in broad daylight. She walked with her shoulders hunched, her arms crossed, the posture of a woman trying to make herself invisible. Helen got out of her car and crossed the street. Brittany. The woman froze like a deer caught in headlights. Who are you? How do you know my name? My name is Helen Cole. I'm Tyler's grandmother. The color drained from Brittany's face. I can't talk to you. Kevin said, I know what Kevin said. I know what Kevin does. Helen kept her voice gentle but firm. I also know you've been calling domestic violence hotlines. I know you're scared, and I know that somewhere inside you, there's a part that knows what Kevin is doing is wrong. Brittany's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. He'll kill me. If he finds out I talked to you, he doesn't have to find out. Not now. Not ever. Helen stepped closer. I just need 5 minutes. Please. My grandson's life depends on it. Brittany glanced around frantically, checking for watchers, for spies. There's a coffee shop, she whispered. 2 blocks east, back entrance. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. She practically ran to her car. Helen walked to the coffee shop on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her heart was pounding. Her mouth was dry, but she kept moving. 10 minutes later, Brittany slipped into the booth across from her. I only have a few minutes, Brittany said. Kevin tracks my phone. If I'm gone too long, he'll want to know where I was. Then I'll talk fast. Helen leaned forward. Kevin is trying to take my grandson away from me, not because he loves Tyler, not because he wants to be a father, because Tyler has a settlement worth $175,000 and Kevin wants the money. I know. Brittany's voice was barely audible. He talks about it all the time, how he's going to cash in on the kid, how he deserves that money after putting up with his ex-wife. Helen felt sick. Did he ever tell you about Tyler's disability? About why he left? He said the kid was defective, that he wasn't going to waste his life raising someone else's mistake. That defective child is a 10-year-old boy who loves space and makes his own bed every morning and has never once complained about the leg braces he has to wear. That mistake lost his mother to addiction and his father to abandonment, and all he wants is a family that won't leave him. Brittany was crying now, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what he was really like when I married him. By the time I figured it out, it was too late." "It's not too late." Helen reached across the table and took Brittany's hand. "You can still help. You can still stop this." "How?" "He has lawyers. He has money. He has a wife who knows the truth." Helen squeezed her hand. "Testify, Brittany. Tell the judge what Kevin is really like, what he said about Tyler, about the money, about everything." Brittany shook her head violently. "He'll destroy me. He'll take everything. What does he have that's worth more than your soul?" Helen's voice cracked. "I'm asking you to save a child, Brittany. A child who has done nothing wrong. A child who deserves a chance at a real life. Can you live with yourself if you stay silent and Kevin takes him?" Brittany stared at her, tears still falling, hands trembling. "I have recordings," she whispered. Helen's heart stopped. "What?" "I started recording him months ago on my phone. I was gathering evidence in case I ever got brave enough to leave." "What's on the recordings?" "Everything. His plans to take Tyler for the money, his threats against me, his confession about the false witness." Helen couldn't breathe. "He confessed? On tape?" "He was drunk. He thought I was asleep. He was on the phone with his lawyer, laughing about how they'd found some ex-biker willing to lie for 50 grand. Brittany's voice shook. "I have all of it, Mrs. Cole. Everything you need to destroy him. Then give it to us, please." Brittany was silent for a long moment. Helen could see the war raging behind her eyes. Fear versus conscience. Self-preservation versus redemption. Finally, Brittany reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "I made copies, just in case." She pressed it into Helen's hand. "Take it, use it, and when this is over, help me get away from him." "I promise." Helen gripped the flash drive like it was made of gold. "The moment this is done, we'll make sure you're safe." Brittany stood abruptly. "I have to go. If he checks my location..." "Go. And Brittany?" The younger woman paused. "Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." Brittany nodded once, then disappeared through the back door like she'd never been there at all. Helen sat alone in the booth, the flash drive burning in her palm. They had him. They finally had him. She called Mason from the car. "I got it. I got everything." "What? How?" "Brittany, she's been recording Kevin for months. His plans, his threats, his confession about paying the witness. It's all here, Mason. We can prove everything." There was silence on the other end. Then a sound Helen had never heard from Mason Cole. He was crying. "We're going to win," he said, his voice breaking. "We're actually going to win." "We're going to win," Helen repeated. But even as she said it, she knew that Kevin Price wouldn't go down without a fight. And she was right. The final hearing was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. On Wednesday night, everything fell apart. Helen was in the kitchen making dinner when her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Hello?" "Mrs. Cole, this is Officer Martinez with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling about your husband, Mason Cole." Helen's blood turned to ice. "What about him?" "Ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Cole has been arrested." "Arrested? For what?" "Possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. Officers found 2 kilograms of methamphetamine in the saddlebags of his motorcycle during a routine traffic stop." The phone slipped from Helen's hand. No. This wasn't possible. Mason didn't do drugs. Mason had never... Kevin. This was Kevin. She scrambled to pick up the phone. "Officer, my husband was framed. He's been targeted by—" "Ma'am, I can't discuss the details of an ongoing investigation. Mr. Cole is being held at the 4th Avenue Jail. He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning? But we have a custody hearing tomorrow morning." "I'm sorry, ma'am. That's not our concern." The line went dead. Helen stood frozen in her kitchen, the world crumbling around her. Mason was in jail, framed. The hearing was in 12 hours. And Tyler, she ran to his room, found him sitting on his bed, looking at her with terrified eyes. "Grandma Ellie? What's wrong? Where's Papa Mason?" Helen knelt beside him, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Sweetheart, something bad has happened. Something that isn't true, but people think it is. Papa Mason has to go away for a little while." "Go away? But he promised he wouldn't leave." "He didn't choose to leave, baby. Someone is lying about him. Someone is trying to hurt our family." Tyler's face crumpled. "My other daddy? Kevin?" Helen couldn't answer. The truth was too terrible. "Is Kevin going to take me away?" Tyler whispered. "No." Helen pulled him into her arms. "No, sweetheart, I won't let that happen. I will never let that happen." But even as she said it, she didn't know how she would keep that promise. The next 3 hours were a blur. Tank arrived with Viper and Rocket. They strategized, argued, made phone calls that went nowhere. Mason's bail was set at $500,000, an impossibly high amount designed to keep him locked up. "Kevin's got a judge in his pocket," Viper growled. "That's the only explanation. Normal bail for possession wouldn't be anywhere near this high." "Can we fight it?" Helen asked desperately. "We can try, but not before tomorrow morning." "What about the recordings? Can't we use those to prove Mason was framed?" Tank shook his head. "We need to authenticate them first. Get Brittany to testify that they're real. That takes time we don't have." "So what do we do?" Silence. The men exchanged glances that said everything. They didn't know. At 11 p.m., Helen's phone rang again. It was Kevin. "How does it feel, Helen?" His voice was dripping with satisfaction. "How does it feel to know you've lost?" "You framed him. You planted those drugs." "Prove it," Kevin laughed. "Here's how tomorrow is going to go. Your biker husband will be in jail. Your lawyer will have nothing. And the judge will have no choice but to transfer custody to me. By this time tomorrow, Tyler will be living in my house, and you'll never see him again." "You don't want Tyler. You want his money." "And I'll get it. Every penny. The kid's going to make me rich, Helen. Isn't that ironic? The defective son I walked away from is finally going to be worth something." Helen's hand tightened around the phone. "I have Brittany's recordings." The line went silent. "What did you say?" "I said I have recordings of you planning this whole thing, confessing to paying off Danny Kowalski, admitting you only want Tyler for the settlement money." Helen's voice was steel. "Do you really think Brittany is as stupid as you thought? She's been documenting everything, Kevin, and now I have it all. You're bluffing. Play the hearing tomorrow and find out." She hung up. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was iron. 3 minutes later, her phone rang again. Blocked number. "Mrs. Cole, don't hang up." The voice was different, professional. "I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Price. He's willing to discuss a settlement." "Not interested. He's prepared to drop all charges against your husband and withdraw his custody petition in exchange for the recordings and your silence." Helen laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Tell Kevin he can go to hell." "Mrs. Cole, I strongly advise you to consider—" "I've considered. My answer is no. We'll see you in court." She hung up again. Viper was staring at her with something like admiration. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the dumbest." "Maybe both." Helen set down her phone. "But I'm done being afraid of Kevin Price. He's taken too much already. He doesn't get to take anything else." "What's the plan then?" Helen looked at Tank. "Can you get Mason out? Any way at all?" I've got some favors I can call in, but it'll take a miracle. Then make one. I don't care how. Tank nodded slowly. I'll try. At 2 a.m., Tyler appeared in the living room doorway. Grandma Ellie. Helen looked up from where she'd been sitting, staring at nothing. Sweetheart, why aren't you asleep? I can't sleep. I'm scared. Helen opened her arms and Tyler made his way to her, settling into her embrace like he'd done 1,000 times before. I'm scared too, she admitted. Is Papa Mason going to be okay? I hope so, baby. I really hope so. If Kevin takes me, Tyler's voice broke, will you still love me? Helen held him tighter. Tyler, listen to me. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter where you end up, I will always love you. Always. That will never change. But I won't be with you. You'll always be with me. In here, she pressed a hand to her heart. And I will fight every single day to get you back. I will never stop fighting. Do you understand? Tyler nodded against her chest. And you know what else? Helen lifted his chin so he could see her eyes. Your mama is watching over you, from heaven, and she's fighting for you too. You are so loved, Tyler, by so many people. Never forget that. I love you, Grandma Ellie. I love you more, sweet boy. I love you most. They held each other in the darkness, grandmother and grandson, waiting for the dawn that would decide their fate. At 6:47 a.m., Tank burst through the apartment door. I got him. Helen shot to her feet. What? I got him out. Don't ask me how. I'll probably be disbarred. But Mason is free. He's on his way here now. Helen collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief. 20 minutes later, Mason walked through the door. He looked terrible, exhausted, disheveled, still wearing the clothes they'd arrested him in. But he was there. He was free. Tyler threw himself at Mason so hard he nearly knocked him over. Papa Mason, you came back. You promised and you came back. Mason dropped to his knees and held the boy tight. I told you, buddy, I don't break my promises. Helen joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them, the three of them tangled together in the middle of the living room. The hearing is in 2 hours, Tank said quietly. We need to move. Mason pulled back, looked at Helen with fire in his eyes. Let's finish this. Courtroom 3B was standing room only. The Hells Angels had come out in force, not in leather but in suits, rows of them filling half the gallery. On the other side, Kevin's supporters were notably absent. Even his lawyer looked uncomfortable. Judge Morrison entered at exactly 9 a.m. Her expression was unreadable. We are here for the final custody determination in the matter of Tyler Garrett. Before we begin, I understand there have been some developments. Kevin's lawyer stood. Your Honor, the respondent, Mason Cole, was arrested last night on serious drug charges. We moved to have him removed from these proceedings and his character testimony excluded. Tank rose immediately. Your Honor, those charges have already been dropped. The evidence was planted, and we can prove it. Dropped? The judge's eyebrows rose. Explain. The arresting officer's body cameras show irregularities in the search procedure. Additionally, we have evidence that the drugs were placed in Mr. Cole's motorcycle while it was parked and unattended. Evidence including surveillance footage from a neighboring business. Kevin went pale. Furthermore, Tank continued, we have recordings that directly implicate Mr. Price in a conspiracy to frame Mr. Cole, bribe witnesses, and manipulate these proceedings. Tank produced the flash drive and handed it to the bailiff. We request that the court hear these recordings. Kevin shot to his feet. This is outrageous. Those recordings were obtained illegally. They were made by your own wife, Mr. Price, with her full knowledge and consent. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison slammed her gavel. Order! Order in this court! She turned to Tank. You have recordings from Mr. Price's spouse? Yes, Your Honor, and Mrs. Price is prepared to testify. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Brittany walked in. She was shaking visibly, her eyes red-rimmed, but she walked past Kevin without looking at him and took her place at the witness stand. State your name for the record. Brittany Marie Price. And you are married to Kevin Price, the petitioner in this case? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mrs. Price, did you make recordings of conversations with your husband? Yes. Why? Brittany finally looked at Kevin. There were tears on her cheeks, but her voice was steady. Because I was afraid of him. Because I knew what he was capable of. And because I knew that someday, someone would need to know the truth about the man I married. Kevin's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Morrison waved him off. Continue, Mrs. Price. And Brittany told them everything. Kevin's threats, his manipulation, his obsession with Tyler's settlement money, his confession about paying Danny Kowalski to lie, his plans to institutionalize Tyler once he had control of the money, his laughing description of how he would milk that crippled kid for every penny he was worth. By the time she finished, Kevin was gray-faced and sweating. The recordings were played. Kevin's own voice, damning himself with every word. Judge Morrison listened in stony silence. When the final recording ended, she looked at Kevin with undisguised contempt. Mr. Price, do you have anything to say? Kevin's mouth opened, closed. He looked at his lawyer, who shook his head minutely. Your Honor, Save it. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. In my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a more blatant attempt to manipulate the court system. You abandoned your son for 10 years. You filed for custody solely to access his settlement funds. You paid a witness to commit perjury. You framed an innocent man. And you terrorized your own wife to keep her silent. She stood. Mr. Price, I am holding you in contempt and remanding you to custody pending criminal charges. Bailiff. 2 officers moved toward Kevin. He tried to run, actually tried to flee the courtroom, but they caught him before he reached the door. This isn't over, Kevin screamed as they dragged him away. That's my son! My son! The courtroom doors slammed shut behind him. Judge Morrison turned to Helen and Mason. Mr. and Mrs. Cole, I owe you an apology. The system failed you. It should never have come to this. She took a deep breath. Full custody of Tyler Garrett is granted to Helen Cole and her husband, Mason Cole. No further reviews will be required. This case is closed. She signed the order with a flourish. And just like that, it was over. Helen turned to Mason, tears streaming down her face. We did it. We actually did it. Mason couldn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms and held on like he would never let go. From the gallery, Tyler was screaming with joy. Grandma! Papa! We won! We won! The Hells Angels erupted in cheers. Viper lifted Tyler onto his shoulders, the boy laughing and waving like he'd conquered the world. Because he had. Outside the courthouse, the Arizona sun blazed down on them with all its fury. But Helen didn't feel the heat. She felt nothing but relief and joy and gratitude. Mason stood beside her, Tyler between them, their hands intertwined. What now? Mason asked quietly. Helen looked up at him. At this man who had walked into her life as a stranger and become her everything. Now, she said, we go home. And they did. The first week after the hearing felt like waking up from a nightmare and not quite believing it was over. Helen found herself checking the locks 3 times before bed, listening for footsteps that weren't there, reaching for her phone every time it buzzed, half expecting to hear Kevin's voice on the other end. But the calls didn't come. The threats didn't materialize. Kevin Price was sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial on charges that would keep him locked up for years. Witness tampering, conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports, attempted extortion. The list grew longer every day as investigators dug deeper into his past. It was over. It was really, truly over. So why couldn't Helen breathe? Mason found her on the balcony at 2 a.m., staring at nothing, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Can't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Can't stop thinking. About what? Helen was quiet for a long moment. About how close we came, about how easily it could have gone the other way. If Brittany hadn't recorded him, if Tank hadn't found the surveillance footage, if you hadn't, she trailed off. If I hadn't what? If you hadn't stood up in that diner, Helen finally looked at him. If you just finished your coffee and walked away like any normal person would have done. Mason took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused, but his touch was gentle. I couldn't walk away, Helen. I tried. For about 30 seconds, I sat there telling myself it wasn't my business, that I should stay out of it, that getting involved would only make my life more complicated. He paused. And then I heard you say his name, Tyler. And I thought about Emma, about how she never got a chance to grow up, about how some kids get abandoned by the people who are supposed to protect them, and some kids get loved so fiercely that a grandmother would do anything to keep them safe. His voice cracked. I couldn't save Emma. I wasn't there when she needed me. But I could be there for Tyler. I could be there for you. And that was enough to get me out of that booth. Helen squeezed his hand. You saved us, Mason. No, we saved each other. They sat in silence, watching the stars fade as the first hints of dawn crept across the Arizona sky. What happens now? Helen asked finally. What do you want to happen? It was such a simple question, and yet Helen had no idea how to answer it. For 30 days, their entire existence had been focused on survival, on fighting, on getting through each hour without losing Tyler. Now that the fight was over, she didn't know who she was supposed to be. I want to stop being afraid, she said quietly. I want to wake up one morning and not immediately think about what could go wrong. I want Tyler to have a normal childhood. She hesitated. What? I want this to be real. Us. This family we've built. She turned to face him fully. Is it real, Mason? Or is it just something we created to survive? Mason didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to the edge of the balcony, looked out at the sleeping city below. When I married you, he said slowly, I told myself it was just a legal maneuver, a piece of paper, a way to help a stranger in trouble. He turned back to her. I was lying, to myself, to you, to everyone. What do you mean? I mean, I saw you in that diner, Helen. I saw the way you carried yourself, the way you worked despite your aching knees, the way you smiled at the customers even when they were rude, the way you checked your phone with that mixture of hope and dread that I recognized because I used to feel it every time Sarah called me overseas. He walked back to her, knelt beside her chair. I saw a woman who had been through hell and was still standing, still fighting, still loving with everything she had despite all the reasons she had to give up. His voice dropped. And I thought maybe if I could help someone like that, someone who deserved to be saved, then maybe my life wasn't a complete waste after all. Helen's eyes were filling with tears. It was never just a legal maneuver for me, Mason continued. It was a lifeline. You threw me a rope when I was drowning, Helen. You just didn't know it. I thought you were the one saving me. Maybe we were saving each other. Maybe that's how it's supposed to work. Helen reached out and touched his face. Her fingers traced the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the scars he tried to hide. I love you, Mason Cole. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how, but I love you. Mason closed his eyes. A single tear escaped down his cheek. I love you too, Helen. I've loved you since the day you looked at me in that courthouse and trusted me with everything you had. He leaned forward and kissed her. Soft, gentle, a promise. When they pulled apart, the sun was rising over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. So what happens now? Helen asked again, smiling through her tears. Now we live, together, as a real family. I think I'd like that. Me too. The second week brought changes Helen hadn't anticipated. Mason sold his small property, a rundown cabin outside Flagstaff that he'd bought after Sarah and Emma died, planning to hide from the world until it forgot about him. He used the money, combined with Helen's savings, to put a down payment on a house. Not a big house, not a fancy house. Just a 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood with a yard big enough for Tyler to play in and a garage where Mason could tinker with his motorcycle. The day they moved in, Tyler stood in the doorway of his new room with his mouth hanging open. "This is all mine?" "All yours, buddy." "But it's huge. I could fit like 10 beds in here." "You only need one." "Can I paint the walls?" "Grandma Ellie said I could paint the walls." Mason looked at Helen, who shrugged helplessly. "She did?" "I might have mentioned it." Tyler was already bouncing on his crutches, his mind racing. "I want stars, glow-in-the-dark stars everywhere, and maybe a mural of the solar system, and NASA posters, and how about we start with the glow-in-the-dark stars and work our way up?" "Deal." That night, the three of them sat on the bare floor of the empty living room, eating pizza from boxes and drinking lemonade from paper cups. The furniture wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. The walls were bare. The house still smelled like fresh paint and possibility. "I've never had a house before," Tyler said quietly. "Just apartments." "Me neither," Helen admitted. "Not since your grandpa Tom died." "What about you, Papa Mason?" Mason was quiet for a moment. "I had a house once, a long time ago, with Sarah and Emma. It was a lot like this one, actually. Small, simple, but it felt like home." "Do you miss it?" "I miss what was in it, the people, the love." Mason reached over and ruffled Tyler's hair. "But you know what? I think I'm going to love this house even more." "Why?" "Because it's got you two in it." Tyler grinned. "You're getting mushy, Papa Mason." "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." "Your secret's safe with me." Helen watched them, her grandson and her husband, and felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been tight and scared for so long finally started to loosen. This was real. This was her family, and no one was ever going to take them away from her again. The third week brought Brittany. She showed up at their new house unannounced, looking thinner than the last time Helen had seen her, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous energy that set Helen's teeth on edge. "I'm sorry," Brittany said before Helen could even speak. "I know I should have called. I didn't know where else to go." Helen hesitated. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Brittany sat on the edge of their new couch like she was afraid it might swallow her whole. Her hands twisted together in her lap. "Kevin's lawyers are trying to contact me. They want me to change my testimony, say I was coerced, that the recordings were edited." Helen's blood ran cold. "Are you going to?" "No, God, no, Brittany's voice broke. "I'm scared, Mrs. Cole. Kevin has friends, people who do things for him. Even from jail, he's still got reach." "Have they threatened you?" "Not directly, just messages. Phone calls at 3 a.m. where no one says anything. A dead rat on my doorstep." Brittany was crying now. "I testified against him. I helped put him away. And now I'm all alone, and I don't know how to—" "You're not alone." Mason's voice came from the hallway. He walked into the living room, his face unreadable. Brittany flinched. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll go." "Sit down." Mason's voice was firm, but not unkind. "You helped save our family. You think we're going to abandon you now?" Brittany stared at him. "But I was married to Kevin. I knew what he was doing. I should have stopped him sooner. I should have." "You were scared. You were trapped. And when it mattered most, you did the right thing." Mason sat down across from her. "That takes courage. More courage than most people have." "I don't feel courageous. I feel like a coward who waited too long." "A coward wouldn't have testified. A coward wouldn't have handed over those recordings. A coward would have stayed silent and let Kevin win." Mason leaned forward. "You're not a coward, Brittany. You're a survivor, and survivors stick together." Brittany broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Helen sat beside her and pulled her into a hug. We promised to help you, remember? When this was over, we'd make sure you were safe. We meant it. But I can't ask you to. You're not asking, we're offering. Helen looked at Mason. He nodded. Stay with us for a while, until things settle down, until Kevin's people get the message that you're not alone anymore. I couldn't possibly. There's a guest room. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it. Brittany looked up, her face streaked with tears. Why? Why would you do this for me? After everything my husband put you through? Helen took her hand. Because you're not Kevin, sweetheart, and because everyone deserves a second chance. Brittany stayed. At first it was awkward. She tiptoed around the house like a ghost, afraid to take up space, afraid to inconvenience anyone. But Tyler, in his innocent way, broke through her defenses. Hey, Brittany, do you know anything about black holes? Not really. Do you want to learn? Papa Mason is learning too. We could all learn together. And somehow, impossibly, they did. The fourth week brought unexpected visitors. Helen was making breakfast when she heard the rumble of motorcycles outside. Lots of them. Mason was at the door before she could react. He looked out the window and his face did something strange. It softened in a way Helen had rarely seen. It's the club, he said. All of them? Looks like. Helen wiped her hands on her apron and joined him at the window. The entire Hells Angels chapter was parked in their driveway. 20 motorcycles, maybe more. Men in leather vests climbing off their bikes, removing helmets, stretching road-weary muscles. Viper was at the front. He walked up to the door and knocked. Mason opened it. Brother, Viper said, we're here for the housewarming. I didn't know I was having a housewarming. You are now, Viper grinned. Boys, unload the trucks. 2 pickup trucks Helen hadn't noticed pulled up behind the motorcycles. Men started unloading. Furniture, appliances, a massive barbecue grill still in its box. What is this? Helen breathed. Club Tradition, Rocket explained, carrying a brand new television through the front door. When one of us starts a new chapter in life, we make sure they start it right. We can't accept all this. Yes, you can. Viper put a hand on Helen's shoulder. Ghost saved a lot of us over the years, rode with us through dark times, never asked for anything in return. It's time we paid him back. Mason was standing very still, his jaw tight, his eyes suspiciously bright. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. Yeah, we did. Viper pulled him into a bear hug. You found something worth living for, brother. That's worth celebrating. Tyler had come to the door, his eyes wide as he watched the parade of bikers carrying furniture and gifts into his new home. Are all these people your friends, Papa Mason? They're family, Tyler, just like you. Tyler grinned. I have the coolest family ever. The housewarming party lasted until midnight. The bikers were surprisingly gentle with Tyler. They helped him set up his telescope in the backyard. They listened to his rambling explanations of black holes and event horizons. They pretended to understand, even when they clearly didn't. Rocket's daughter, a 12-year-old named Maria, who also used crutches, arrived with her mother. She and Tyler hit it off immediately, comparing notes on physical therapy and trading tips on how to navigate a world that wasn't built for them. Helen watched it all with tears she didn't bother to hide. You okay? Mason asked, slipping his arm around her waist. I never thought I'd have this, any of this. A house, a family, people who actually care. She leaned into him. 3 months ago, I was a 68-year-old waitress with bad knees and a grandson I was terrified of losing. Now look at me. You're still a 68-year-old waitress with bad knees, just one with a biker husband and a house full of Hells Angels. Helen laughed. My church friends are going to have heart attacks. They'll get over it. I'm not sure they will, actually. Mason kissed her temple. Then we'll find new church friends. As the night wound down and the bikers started heading home, Viper pulled Mason aside. You know Kevin's trial is coming up. 6 weeks. I know. Prosecution wants you and Helen to testify. All the stuff he did, the harassment, the threats, the framing, they want it on the record. Mason nodded slowly. We'll do it. It's not going to be pleasant. Kevin's lawyers will try to tear you apart, question your character, bring up the club. Let them. Mason's jaw tightened. I spent 22 years in the Army defending this country. I've got nothing to be ashamed of, and neither does anyone else in this family. Viper studied him. You've changed, Ghost. These past few months, I've never seen you like this. Like what? Alive. Viper smiled. It looks good on you, brother. Real good. The 5th week brought the one thing Helen had been dreading. A letter from Tyler's school. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Cole, it began, we are pleased to inform you that Tyler has been selected to participate in the Arizona Young Scientist Program, a prestigious summer camp for gifted students interested in space science and astronomy. Helen read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Tyler got into what? Mason asked, looking over her shoulder. A gifted program for science at ASU. Our Tyler? Our Tyler. They found him in his room, working on a model of the International Space Station that Rocket had bought him. Tyler, sweetheart, did you apply to some kind of science program? Tyler looked up. Oh, yeah. My teacher helped me fill out the form. She said I probably wouldn't get in because lots of kids apply. Did I do something wrong? Wrong? Baby, you got accepted. Tyler's face went through about 17 emotions in 3 seconds. What? But that program is for smart kids. Really smart kids. You're brilliant, Mason interrupted. You know more about space than anyone I've ever met, including actual scientists. But I have to use crutches. I can't do a lot of the things normal kids do. How am I supposed to? Tyler, Helen knelt down to his level. Do you know who Stephen Hawking was? The physicist. He had ALS. He couldn't walk or talk by himself. But he figured out stuff about black holes that nobody else could. Exactly. Did his disability stop him from being a genius? No. Then why would yours stop you? Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then, you really think I can do this? I know you can, Mason said. And you know what? Emma would have been so jealous. This is exactly the kind of thing she dreamed about. Tyler's eyes went wide. You think Emma would have liked me? Mason's voice caught. I think Emma would have loved you, and I think she's watching right now, probably telling all the other angels that her little brother got into a space program. I'm not really her brother. Sure you are, just not by blood. Mason ruffled his hair. Family is family, remember? Tyler threw his arms around Mason and held on tight. Thank you, Papa Mason, for everything. Don't thank me. You did this yourself. I'm just proud to be along for the ride. That night, after Tyler was asleep, Helen found Mason in the garage, sitting on his motorcycle, but not going anywhere. Just sitting. You okay? I was thinking about Emma. Helen pulled up a folding chair and sat beside him. Tell me about her, the things you haven't told me yet. Mason was quiet for a long moment. She used to make lists. Every New Year's, she'd write down everything she wanted to accomplish. Learn to play guitar, read 50 books, get an A in science, see the northern lights. His voice was barely a whisper. The year she died, her list had 23 things on it. She'd only crossed off 4. That must break your heart. It did. For a long time, I couldn't even look at that list. I kept it in a box with her other stuff. Couldn't throw it away. Couldn't read it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Then, a few weeks ago, I finally opened the box. He handed her the paper. Helen unfolded it carefully. Emma's New Year's resolutions, it said at the top in a teenager's handwriting. 1. Learn to play guitar. Check. 2. Read 50 books. Check. 3. Get an A in science. Check. 4. See the northern lights. 5. Visit NASA. 6. Help someone who needs it. Check. 7. Make Dad proud. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Mason. Number 6. Help someone who needs it. She'd already crossed it off. A month before she died, she organized a fundraiser at her school for a classmate whose family lost everything in a fire. She didn't tell me about it. I only found out after. He took the paper back, held it like it was made of glass. And number 7, make Dad proud. She never got to cross that one off. She didn't know that she already had. 1,000 times over. I never told her enough. I was always deployed, always somewhere else. And I thought I'd have time. I thought there'd be more time. Helen took his hand. Do you know what I think? She said softly. I think Emma knows now. I think she sees everything you're doing for Tyler, for me, for this family. And I think she's so proud of you that she can barely contain herself. Mason looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. You really believe that? I do. And I believe something else too. What? I believe that Emma sent you to us. I believe that somewhere up there she looked down and saw a grandmother crying in a diner and a little boy about to lose everything. And she said, Dad, those people need you. Go help them. Mason's face crumpled. The tears he'd been holding back for 4 years finally broke through. Helen held him while he cried. Held him like she'd held Tyler through 1,000 nightmares. Held him like he mattered, like he was precious, like he was loved. Because he was. When the tears finally stopped, Mason pulled back and looked at her. I don't deserve you, Helen Cole. That's funny. I was about to say the same thing about you. They sat together in the garage, holding hands, not needing to say anything else. Because sometimes love isn't about words. Sometimes it's about being present, being there. Being the person who stays when everyone else walks away. And Mason Cole was done walking away. The 6th week brought Kevin's trial. The courtroom was packed. Media, spectators, people who just wanted to see the man who tried to steal a disabled child's settlement money get what he deserved. Helen and Mason sat in the front row, Tyler between them, Brittany on Helen's other side. Kevin was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. He looked nothing like the arrogant man who threatened Helen in the diner parking lot. He looked broken, defeated. But when his eyes found Helen's, something dark flickered in them. Hatred, pure and undiluted. Helen didn't look away. The trial lasted 3 days. Helen testified about the harassment, the threats, the terror of those 30 days. Mason testified about being framed, about the drugs planted in his motorcycle, about the false witness Kevin had paid. Brittany testified about everything else, the abuse, the manipulation, Kevin's confession that he only wanted Tyler for the money, her recordings played for the jury, Kevin's own voice condemning him over and over again. On the 3rd day, Kevin took the stand in his own defense. It was a disaster. His lawyer tried to paint him as a concerned father who'd made mistakes but genuinely wanted to reconnect with his son. Kevin went off script within 5 minutes, ranting about how the system was rigged against him, how everyone had conspired to take what was rightfully his, how his own wife had betrayed him. That money should be mine, he shouted. I put up with that woman for years. I deserve something for my trouble. Mr. Price, the prosecutor said calmly, are you referring to your son as trouble? I'm referring to the situation, the whole situation. None of this would have happened if that kid had just been normal. The courtroom gasped. Kevin's lawyer dropped his head into his hands. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing would come later, but the charges carried a minimum of 15 years. Kevin Price would be an old man before he saw freedom again. As he was led out of the courtroom, Kevin turned and looked directly at Tyler. This isn't over, he hissed. You're still mine. You'll always be... No. Tyler's voice was small but steady. I'm not yours. I never was. I belong to Grandma Ellie and Papa Mason. They're my real family, and you're nothing." Kevin's face twisted with rage, but the bailiffs were already pulling him away. The doors closed, and Tyler burst into tears. Mason scooped him up immediately, holding him tight despite the boy's weight, not caring that his crutches clattered to the floor. "It's over, buddy. It's really over. He can't hurt you anymore." "I was so scared," Tyler sobbed. "I was trying to be brave, but I was so scared." "You were brave. The bravest person in this whole building." Mason's voice was fierce. "I'm so proud of you, Tyler. So incredibly proud." Helen wrapped her arms around both of them, Brittany joining from the side, the four of them forming a huddle of tears and relief and overwhelming gratitude. Outside the courthouse, the Hells Angels were waiting. Not just the Phoenix chapter, chapters from Tucson, Flagstaff, Albuquerque, 50 motorcycles, maybe more, all lined up in a perfect row. Viper stepped forward. "The boy did good," he said. "We thought he deserved a hero's welcome." Tyler's mouth fell open. "All these people came for me?" "All these people came for family," Viper winked. "You want to ride home, kid? I promise to go slow." Tyler looked at Helen. "Can I, Grandma Ellie? Please?" Helen smiled through her tears. "Go on, just hold on tight." Viper lifted Tyler onto the back of his motorcycle, settled him securely, handed him a helmet. "Ready?" "Ready!" The engines roared to life. 50 motorcycles, 60, the sound drowning out everything else. And then they were moving. A parade of leather and chrome, escorting one small boy through the streets of Phoenix like he was the most important person in the world. Because to them, he was. Mason and Helen followed in their car, Brittany in the back seat. "I can't believe this is happening," Brittany said softly. "I can't believe any of this is real." "It's real." Helen reached back and squeezed her hand. "This is what family looks like. Messy and unexpected and absolutely real." Ahead of them, Tyler was laughing, his arms spread wide like he was flying. And Helen realized something in that moment. The nightmare was over. The healing had begun. And the best part of their story was just getting started. 6 months passed like a dream Helen was afraid to wake from. Every morning she woke up in a house that belonged to her. Every morning she made breakfast in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and possibility. Every morning she watched Mason help Tyler with his leg braces, the two of them talking about black holes and rocket engines and all the things Emma used to love. Every morning Helen thanked God for the impossible gift she'd been given. But some wounds take longer to heal than others. The nightmares came less frequently now, but they still came. Tyler would wake up screaming, certain that Kevin was standing at the foot of his bed. Mason would jolt awake, reaching for weapons that weren't there, his mind still trapped in Afghan battlefields. Helen would find herself checking the locks at 3 a.m., her heart racing for reasons she couldn't name. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the danger is gone. It lives in the body, in the bones, in the small hours of the night when the world is quiet and the memories come flooding back. But they faced it together. That was the difference. That was everything. Dr. Sarah Chen became their family therapist, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in trauma and family dynamics. She saw them together once a week, and individually when needed. "Healing isn't linear," she told them during their 3rd session. "You'll have good days and bad days. Days when you feel like you've conquered everything, and days when you can barely get out of bed. That's normal. That's human." "How do we know when we're better?" Tyler asked. "You don't get better like you're fixing a broken toy. You grow around the wound. You learn to carry it differently. And eventually, the weight becomes something you can bear." Tyler considered this. "Like my leg braces?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Exactly like your leg braces. They don't make your legs perfect. They help you walk. That's what healing does. It helps you walk through life, even when parts of you are still hurting." Mason was the hardest to reach. He'd spent 4 years building walls around his grief, and letting them down didn't come naturally. He'd sit in Dr. Chen's office, arms crossed, jaw tight, giving one-word answers to her questions. "Tell me about Emma." "She was my daughter." "What was she like?" "Smart, kind, loved space." "How did you feel when she died?" Silence. The kind of silence that screamed louder than any words could. Dr. Chen never pushed. She just waited. And slowly, session by session, word by word, Mason began to crack open. "I wasn't there," he said one day, his voice barely audible. "I was 10,000 miles away playing soldier while my family died. What kind of father does that? A father who was serving his country. A father who trusted that his family would be safe. But they weren't safe. I should have been there. I should have... Should have what? Stopped a drunk driver with your bare hands? Known the future? Mason, you're not God. You can't control everything. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But in here," he pressed a fist to his chest, "in here, it still feels like my fault." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. When you married Helen, when you stepped up to protect Tyler, were you trying to make up for what happened to Emma?" Mason went very still. "Yes," he finally admitted. "At first, I thought if I could save them, maybe it would balance out. Maybe God would forgive me for not saving my own family." "And now, do you still feel that way?" Mason thought about Tyler's laugh, Helen's hand in his, the way morning sunlight filled their kitchen, the way he'd started sleeping through the night again. "No," he said slowly. "Now it's not about balance. It's not about making up for anything. Now it's just love. Real love. The kind I thought I'd never feel again. That's called healing, Mason. That's what it looks like." 3 months after Kevin's conviction, something unexpected happened. Tyler's physical therapist, a relentlessly optimistic woman named Janet, who refused to accept the word impossible, called Helen with news that made her drop the phone. "Tyler's making progress, real progress. I think, Mrs. Cole, I think he might be able to walk without his crutches." Helen couldn't speak. "Not immediately," Janet continued quickly. "Not without a lot more work. But the strength is there. The potential is there. If he's willing to push himself, he'll push himself," Helen managed. "You don't know this boy. He'll push himself until he flies." That night she told Tyler and Mason together. Tyler's face went through a dozen emotions: hope, fear, disbelief, and finally a kind of fierce determination that reminded Helen so much of his mother. "I want to try," Tyler said. "I want to try right now." "It doesn't work like that, buddy," Mason said gently. "Janet said it'll take months, maybe longer. You'll have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life." "I don't care, I'll do it. Whatever it takes." Tyler's eyes were blazing. "I want to walk, Papa Mason. I want to show everyone that I'm not broken, that I never was." Mason pulled him into a hug. "You were never broken, Tyler. Not for one single second." The training was brutal. Every day after school, Tyler went to physical therapy. He'd come home exhausted, sometimes crying from the pain, his muscles screaming from exertion. There were days when he wanted to quit, days when he threw his crutches across the room and sobbed that it was too hard, that he couldn't do it, that everyone was lying about him getting better. On those days, Mason would sit with him on the floor, not saying anything, just being present, just being there. "Emma wanted to be an astronaut," Mason told him one night. "She knew the odds were against her. Thousands of people apply. Only a handful get chosen. But she never gave up. She said, 'Dad, even if I don't make it to space, I'll have spent my whole life reaching for the stars. That's not a waste. That's a life.'" Tyler wiped his eyes. "Do you think she would have made it?" "I think she would have given it everything she had, just like you're doing now." "But what if I can't? What if I work really hard and I still can't walk?" "Then you'll still have worked really hard. You'll still have pushed yourself further than anyone thought possible. And that's something to be proud of, Tyler, no matter what happens." Tyler leaned against him. "I'm tired, Papa Mason." I know, buddy. I know. Can I rest just for today? You can rest whenever you need to. There's no shame in resting. Okay. Tyler closed his eyes. Will you stay with me? Always. 4 months into Tyler's therapy, Brittany moved out. Not because anything was wrong, because everything was finally right. She'd found an apartment of her own, a job at a domestic violence shelter where she could help women who'd been through what she'd experienced. She'd started therapy, started rebuilding. I can't thank you enough, she told Helen on her last day. You took in a stranger. You showed me what family is supposed to look like. I'll never forget that. You're not a stranger, Helen said, hugging her tight. You never were. You saved us, remember? Without those recordings, without you, I never would have had the courage to use them. You gave me that, Helen. You and Mason and Tyler. You showed me that there are still good people in this world. Tyler gave Brittany a drawing he'd made, a picture of their family, all of them together, with Brittany right there in the middle. So you don't forget us, he said. Brittany started crying. I could never forget you, Tyler. Not in a million years. You can come visit, right? Anytime you want? Anytime. She kissed his forehead. I promise. As Brittany's car pulled away, Helen felt Mason's arms slip around her waist. She's going to be okay, he said. I know. I'll miss her. She's not gone. She's just growing, like we all are. Helen leaned into him. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between marrying a stranger and learning about black holes. It sneaks up on you. Helen laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from deep in her chest and didn't stop until there were tears in her eyes. I love you, Mason Cole. I love you too, Helen Cole, more than I ever thought I could love anything again. Tyler's 11th birthday arrived on a perfect Arizona spring day. Helen had planned a small party, just family and close friends at Big Joe's Diner, the place where everything had started. She'd arranged for Tyler's favorite cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, shaped like the space shuttle, but she hadn't planned for what happened next. The diner was packed. Hell's Angels and church friends mixing together in a way that should have been awkward, but somehow wasn't. Brenda from the diner, chatting with Viper like they'd known each other for years. Dr. Chen sitting next to Rocket, deep in conversation about something that made them both laugh. Tyler sat at the head of the table, grinning so wide his face looked like it might split in two. Make a wish, buddy, Mason called out. Tyler closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out all 11 candles in one shot. Everyone cheered. What did you wish for? Helen asked. Tyler looked at her, then at Mason, then at the room full of people who had become his family. I can't tell you yet. It hasn't come true. Before Helen could respond, Tyler pushed back from the table. He reached for his crutches, and then he set them aside. Tyler? Helen's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing? Something I've been practicing. Tyler gripped the edge of the table. Janet said not to try until next month, but I wanted to do it today. For my birthday. For you. He let go of the table, and he stood, not wobbling, not falling, just standing, on his own 2 feet, for the first time in his life. The room went absolutely silent. Tyler took a breath, and then he took a step. His legs shook, his face contorted with effort, but he took a step, and then another, and another. Helen's hand flew to her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face, but she couldn't look away, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch her grandson do the impossible. Mason was frozen beside her. His eyes were wide, wet, fixed on Tyler like he was watching a miracle unfold. Because he was. 5 steps, 6, 7. Tyler's legs were trembling violently now. His face was pale with exertion, but he kept going. 8 steps, 9, 10. He stopped directly in front of Helen and Mason. I did it, he breathed. I walked. And then his legs gave out. Mason caught him before he hit the ground, sweeping him up into his arms, holding him tight while Tyler laughed and cried, and everyone in the diner erupted into chaos, cheering, sobbing, rushing forward to touch the boy who had just defied everything the world had told him he couldn't do. "I walked, Papa Mason. Did you see? I walked." "I saw, buddy. I saw everything." Mason's voice was wrecked, completely destroyed. "I'm so proud of you, so incredibly proud." Helen wrapped her arms around both of them, the three of them tangled together in the middle of the celebration, holding on like they'd never let go. "How?" she finally managed. "Janet said you weren't ready." She said, "I've been practicing," Tyler said. "At night, when you were asleep, holding on to furniture, taking tiny steps. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to show you that all the hard work was worth it." "Oh, sweetheart." Helen kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his hair. "You didn't have to prove anything to us. We already knew you were extraordinary." "I know, but I wanted to prove it to myself." From across the room, Janet, the physical therapist, was crying into a napkin, shaking her head in disbelief. "That kid," she said to no one in particular. "That impossible, wonderful kid." Viper raised his glass. "To Tyler, the bravest damn person I've ever met." "To Tyler," the room echoed back, 50 voices strong. Tyler grinned, exhausted, triumphant, absolutely radiant. "Best birthday ever," he whispered. And it was only going to get better. After the party wound down, after the guests left and the cake was eaten, and Tyler finally fell asleep in the car, Mason drove them home in silence. Helen watched him from the passenger seat. His profile was strong, steady, but there was something different about him tonight, something lighter. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Emma," Mason's voice was soft. "I was thinking about how proud she would be of Tyler, how much she would have loved him. She would have. And I was thinking about you." He glanced at her. "About us, about how we started. A stranger in a diner, an impossible deadline, a marriage that wasn't supposed to be real. But it is real. It's the most real thing in my life." Helen reached over and took his hand. "Mine too." They pulled into their driveway, their house, their home. Mason carried Tyler inside. The boy barely stirred, completely spent from his triumph, and settled him into bed. Helen followed, pulling the covers up, brushing hair from Tyler's forehead. "Love you, Grandma Ellie," Tyler mumbled without opening his eyes. "Love you more, sweet boy. Love you most." The words they'd exchanged 1,000 times. The ritual that had carried them through nightmares and court hearings and impossible days. Helen kissed his forehead and turned off the light. In the hallway, Mason was waiting. "Can we talk?" he asked. "There's something I need to say." They went to the balcony, their place, the spot where they'd had every important conversation since moving in. The Arizona stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars they'd watched 100 times. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a beginning. Mason pulled something from his pocket. A ring. Helen's breath caught. "I know we're already married," Mason said quickly. "I know we have the paper and the legal stuff and all of it. But we never did this part. The real part. The part where I ask you to spend your life with me because I love you. Not because we needed to fool a judge." "Mason." Helen Marie Garrett Cole. He went down on one knee, his bad leg protesting, not caring. "You are the bravest, kindest, most stubborn woman I have ever met. You took a broken man and showed him that he could be whole again. You gave me a family when I thought I'd lost the right to have one. You made me believe that second chances are real." His voice cracked. "I know I'm not perfect. I have nightmares and scars and a past I'm still learning to live with. But I love you. I love Tyler. I love this life we've built. And I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you both know how much you mean to me." He held up the ring. Simple, beautiful, exactly right. "Will you marry me again? For real this time? Forever?" Helen was crying too hard to speak. She nodded, and then she found her voice. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Mason slid the ring onto her finger, right next to the simple band she'd worn since that frantic day at the courthouse. 2 rings, 2 promises, 1 love. He stood and kissed her, not desperate, not urgent, just certain. Like they had all the time in the world, like nothing would ever tear them apart again. When they finally pulled apart, Helen was laughing through her tears. "We're ridiculous," she said. "2 old people proposing on a balcony like teenagers. We earned this, every bit of it. I know, I never thought I'd have this again. After Tom died, I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I'd spend the rest of my years working and worrying and just surviving. And now?" Helen looked at the ring on her finger, at the man standing before her, at the house that held her sleeping grandson. "Now I'm living, really living, for the first time in 15 years. Mason pulled her close. "Me too, for the first time in 4 years. They stood there, holding each other, watching the stars. And somewhere up there, Helen liked to think, Emma was watching too, smiling, giving her blessing to the family her father had found when he thought all hope was lost. The vow renewal ceremony was held 1 month later. They chose Rusty's Highway Diner, the place where everything had started. The same booth where Mason had been sitting when he heard Helen's whispered desperation. The same floor where she'd collapsed among broken glass and spilled coffee. The diner was closed for a private event. Every seat was filled. Helen wore a simple white dress, nothing fancy but beautiful. Mason wore a suit instead of leather for the first time since their courthouse wedding. Tyler stood beside them as ring bearer, actually walking, with only a cane for support, down the aisle they'd created between tables. The guests cried before the ceremony even started. Viper officiated. He'd gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. "Dearly beloved," he began, his rough voice cracking with emotion, "we are gathered here today to witness something rare, something beautiful. The union of 2 people who found each other in the darkest moment and chose to build something light." He looked at Mason. "Ghost Mason, I've known you for years. I've seen you at your worst, lost, broken, ready to give up. And I've watched you come back to life these past months. Not because anything about your past changed, but because you found something worth living for. Someone worth living for." He turned to Helen. "Mrs. Cole, you are one of the bravest people I've ever met. You faced down a system designed to crush you and won. You trusted a stranger with everything you had, and you showed all of us that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about love." Viper's voice steadied. "Mason, do you take Helen to be your wife? To love and cherish, through good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live." Mason looked at Helen. His eyes were bright with tears he didn't try to hide. "I do, with everything I am and everything I'll ever be." "Helen, do you take Mason to be your husband? To love and cherish, through good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live?" Helen smiled, the smile that had first made Mason's broken heart beat again. "I do, forever and always." "Then by the power vested in me by the internet and the state of Arizona, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. And this time, everybody knows it's real." Viper grinned. "You may kiss your bride." Mason kissed Helen while the diner erupted in cheers and applause and the sound of rough bikers crying into their napkins. When they pulled apart, Tyler was bouncing on his feet that worked now, that carried him places he never thought he could go. "We're a real family now," he shouted. "A forever family." "We always were, buddy," Mason said, pulling him into the hug. "We always were." The reception lasted until midnight. There was dancing, awkward, joyful dancing from people who mostly didn't know how. There was cake, more chocolate with vanilla frosting, because Tyler insisted. There were speeches that made everyone cry and toasts that made everyone laugh. And there was love. So much love it filled the diner to bursting. At one point, Helen stepped outside for air. The parking lot was quiet, the Arizona night cool and clear. She looked at the spot where she'd once been threatened by Kevin Price, the spot where she'd thought her world was ending. Now it was just a parking lot, just asphalt and painted lines and nothing to fear. "You okay?" Mason had followed her out. Of course he had. "I'm perfect," Helen said. "I was just thinking about how much has changed. A year ago I was a waitress working double shifts, terrified of losing my grandson, completely alone in the world. And now?" Helen turned to look at him. This man who had changed everything. This stranger who had become her whole world. "Now I have a husband who loves me, a grandson who can walk, a house full of memories we're still making, a family I never expected and can't imagine living without." That's a lot of change. It's a lot of blessing. Mason took her hand. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "That phone call, the one that started everything. 43 minutes to produce a husband. Those were the most important 43 minutes of my life. Because you saved us? Because you saved me." Mason's voice was fierce. "I was dying, Helen, slowly, quietly, disappearing into my own grief. And then I heard your voice through that closet door, and something woke up. Something that had been asleep for 4 years. What was it? Hope. The belief that maybe I could still matter. Maybe I could still do something good. Maybe there was still a reason I was alive." Helen squeezed his hand. "And now? Now I know there was. You, Tyler, this family, every single thing that's happened since that day. That's why I survived. That's why I'm here. We were meant to find each other. I believe that. I really do." They stood in silence, looking up at the stars. Emma's stars, Tyler's stars, the same stars that had watched over them through everything. "We should go back inside," Helen finally said. "They'll wonder where we are." "Let them wonder. This is our night." "It is, isn't it?" Mason kissed her forehead. "It is, and every night after this." They walked back into the diner together, hand in hand, into the warmth and noise and love that waited for them. Their family, their home, their happily ever after. 1 year later, Tyler presented his project at the Arizona Young Scientist Fair. The auditorium was packed. Students from all over the state had gathered to share their work, their discoveries, their dreams. Tyler's project was about black holes. Obviously, he'd built a model, written a paper, created a presentation that even the judges admitted was beyond his years. But what captured everyone's attention wasn't the science. It was the dedication page. "This project is dedicated to my family," Tyler read aloud, his voice strong and clear. "To my grandma Ellie, who worked double shifts so I could have leg braces and books about space. To my Papa Mason, who taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. And to Emma Cole, who never got to reach the stars, but inspired me to try." He looked up at the audience, at Helen and Mason in the front row, holding hands, crying openly. "My family isn't normal. My grandma married a stranger to save me from a man who wanted to steal my money. My grandpa is a Hell's Angel who fought in wars and lost everything and still found a way to love again. I have aunts and uncles who ride motorcycles and look scary, but cry at movies and help kids who can't walk learn to stand." Tyler smiled. "People used to tell me I couldn't do things, couldn't walk, couldn't run, couldn't be like other kids. They said my disability would hold me back. They said I'd never be normal." He paused. "They were right. I'll never be normal. But normal is boring. Normal didn't walk 10 steps on their 11th birthday. Normal didn't get a whole motorcycle club to escort them home from court. Normal doesn't have a family that was built from scratch out of desperation and hope and stubborn love." His voice grew stronger. "I have something better than normal. I have people who chose me, who fought for me, who showed me that family isn't about biology. It's about showing up, It's about staying when things get hard. It's about love. He looked directly at Mason. Papa Mason, you told me once that you carry your daughter with you everywhere, that her memory lives in your heart and guides your choices. I want you to know that she's not just in your heart anymore. She's in mine too. She's part of our family now. And when I look at the stars, I think about her. I think about what she would have discovered, what she would have become, and I try to honor that every day. Mason's face crumpled. He didn't try to hide it, didn't try to be strong. He just let the tears fall. And Grandma Ellie, Tyler continued, turning to Helen, you gave up everything for me. Your retirement, your rest, your peace. You worked yourself to exhaustion so I could have what I needed. You never complained, never gave up, never stopped believing that things would get better. Helen was sobbing now, her hand pressed to her heart. Thank you, Tyler said simply. Thank you for loving me when my own father wouldn't. Thank you for being my mom and my grandma and my best friend. Thank you for being brave. He stepped away from the podium. I don't know if I'll ever make it to space. I don't know if my legs will ever be completely normal. But I know this. I have the best family in the world, and that's better than any rocket ship. That's better than any star. The auditorium erupted in applause. Tyler walked down from the stage, his cane barely touching the ground. He made his way to Helen and Mason and threw his arms around both of them. I love you, he whispered. I love you so much. We love you too, sweet boy, Helen managed through her tears. More than you'll ever know. I love you most, Mason added, his voice wrecked. And there, in an auditorium full of strangers, the Cole family held each other and cried and laughed and didn't care who was watching. Because they had learned something in the past year, something important, something true. Family isn't born, it's built. One choice at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one act of impossible love at a time. Helen had needed a husband by 3 p.m. What she got was a partner for life. Mason had needed a reason to keep living. What he found was a family worth dying for. And Tyler? Tyler got something no settlement check could ever buy. He got two people who proved that love doesn't care about biology or disability or the cruel judgments of a broken system. Love just shows up. Love just stays. Love just refuses to let go. They walked out of the auditorium together, grandmother, veteran, and the boy who had brought them all together. Outside, the Hells Angels were waiting with their motorcycles, ready to escort Tyler home like the champion he was. Ready? Viper called out. Tyler grinned, the same grin that had first melted Mason's frozen heart, the same grin that reminded Helen why she'd fought so hard. Ready! The engines roared to life. The convoy began to move. And as the Arizona sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Helen looked at her husband and her grandson and the impossible life they'd created together. This is real, she said softly. This is really our life. Mason kissed her hand. It is. Every beautiful, messy, miraculous bit of it. I wouldn't change anything. Neither would I. Tyler looked back at them from Viper's motorcycle, waving, laughing, alive in a way Helen had never seen before. Come on, he shouted. We're family. Families stay together. Helen and Mason climbed into their car and followed the parade of motorcycles through the streets of Phoenix. Behind them, the auditorium, the past, the pain. Ahead of them, home, the future, the rest of their lives. Sometimes miracles wear leather jackets. Sometimes heroes have scars in military records and pasts they're not proud of. Sometimes the most broken people build the strongest families. And sometimes, just sometimes, all it takes is one act of impossible courage to change everything. Helen had whispered her desperate need into a phone. A Hells Angel had heard her, and the rest was a love story that would last forever.